Welcome, everyone. I'm Dani. I lead marketing here at NaNLABS. Thank you so much for joining us at this event. I would like to give you a quick context before we start. NaNLABS is an embedded engineering partner for scale-ups for when your engineering team becomes the bottleneck on growth. We're based in Argentina, work with US companies, and plug into clients' teams long term, running on our own AI native way of working. Today's session is led by Matías Álvarez. He's our co-founder and CEO. Mati has spent over a decade building NaNLABS alongside the founding team and stepped into the CEO role to lead its next stage of growth with a focus on AI-driven systems. He's engineering first to the core, and also he believes good software isn't just functional. It has to be reliable and built for long-term ownership. And that's the lens he brings to everything you're about to hear. His focus is helping organizations move from AI experimentation to production-ready systems, technology that delivers real impact and not just promises. So, with no further ado, I will welcome Mati to the stage, and I'll leave you to it.
Thank you, Dani. Nice intro. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. So, we all know that AI is disrupting and changing a lot of things. Especially in the last 6 months, LLM models got very good at writing code. So the entire way of working is being transformed. So today I like to talk about that, and specifically about something I think most leaders are getting wrong, which is how they manage the return on investment of this transformation. We'll get into the data, we'll get into what's actually driving ROI, and also what's quietly killing it. So before we get into it, just let me tell you a bit more about me and why I think I have something useful to say about all this. So I'm Matías, I'm an Argentine. I've been living in France for the last 7 years and been working with the US and US companies for the last 20. So that is where my accent and mixed accent comes from, if you are wondering. In my career, I started as a software engineer, but I took several different roles at NaNLABS over the years. And today, as the CEO, I talk to CTOs and engineering leaders quite often on a daily basis. And that gives me a specific vantage point. I get to see different teams going through this AI transformation, leaders navigating this in different ways, and the developers actually living this transformation day to day. So that is the perspective that I like to share and where this talk comes from. A bit more about NaNLABS and what we do. So we started the company 13 years ago. We are a nearshore software consultancy based in Argentina, as Dani mentioned before. We are about 60 people working with US companies, and we help our clients doing full stack product development with a special focus on building complex solutions using data and AI. And the way that we work with our clients is that we are embedded on their teams long term. A very crucial part of the work that we do is understand how a group of people work together, the roles, team dynamics, the norms, and how we can make that a high-performing team. So in this new AI era, what matters most to us has not changed. Actually, putting the people first is what we've always preached for, and where actually our company names also comes from. So we are keeping at the center, we are keeping the people at the center while everything around them is accelerating, is changing. And we believe that is what really makes a difference. So let's jump into the market and the type of companies that I'll be talking about today, just to give a bit more context on what companies are relevant for this. On one end of the spectrum, we have these large enterprise companies, like the ones that are covered on the main headlines, companies that are cutting headcount because of AI or because they overhired. And on the other end, we have these AI native startups, sometimes one or two people, so they have no legacy code, no existing clients, and they are moving at a pace that was impossible a few years ago. So both stories are real, but today I like to focus on the mid-sized companies, these startups that with proven product market fit, scale-ups, revenue positive businesses, companies that have a business before AI with clients, revenue, products in production, and engineering teams, right? So this segment in particular doesn't get the media attention that the others get, but it represents a good chunk of the economy and the job market. And their challenge is quite specific because they need to do this transformation while keeping everything running at the same time, and that is hard. And that is the work that we do at NaNLABS every day. So what does the ROI of AI actually look like for these companies? So let's take a look at the data. And what the DORA research team got to the main conclusion that the AI acts as an amplifier. It amplifies the strength of high-performing teams, but it also amplifies the dysfunctions of struggling ones. So here are some numbers that I think are worth analyzing. The first one is 78% of executives report that they are getting ROI from at least one AI use case. Not a big surprise. It confirms that AI unlocks value. What I think this matters is because these are often the same people setting the mandate. We need to use AI. Sometimes they do this with the wrong expectation, thinking that putting AI on top of the company makes everything faster immediately. And this is where I believe CTOs and engineering leaders, and myself included, spend a lot of time explaining the nuance of this. And what it gets interesting is when DORA research helps analyze tens of thousands of engineers, and they found that AI delivers 35 to 40% productivity gains on greenfield projects. But the impact on complex legacy systems, brownfield code, is 10% or less. So that is the first expectation gap that you will need to manage as an engineering leader. The return depends really on the type of work and the context that you are working. And the second one is that before getting the benefits that most organizations hit this idea that DORA calls the J curve, which is a temporary productivity decrease during the AI early adoption, about 15% productivity drop for the initial 3 months. And this is basically the learning cost of the transformation. It's not a failure. It's the investment in learning and adaptation that any organization needs to go through. But once you are through it, the year one ROI actually is around 39%. So the average payback is around 8 months. So I think this shape matters, the short-term cost and the long-term compounding return. So definitely an opportunity is here. But now that we covered these two conversations about when and how much ROI is to expect, let's talk about what actually determines whether you get it at all. So DORA's main insight about this is that the greatest returns of investment are not coming from which AI model you are using. They come rather from the underlying system, this social technical system that combines both layers, the technical layer, yes, the AI, the LLM models, the tooling, automation, CI/CD. That's where most technologists are focused on. But then we have the social layer, and that means culture, how people work together, the org structure, how disciplined our engineering team is, the rituals, the norms. And even though this sounds a bit obvious, what I see quite often is that companies optimize the technical layer primarily, and the social layer gets a bit delayed, treated as a second priority. and even sometimes completely ignored. So a good way to illustrate this is by sharing our own example, an experience that we went through ourselves this year. So we've started developing this AI native platform. Think about it as a greenfield project, an MVP that was supposed to launch in 3-4 months. Our client was very happy with the speed and the velocity that we were achieving. Of course, we were doing AI assisted development. So the product kept growing and the scope kept expanding. And we ended up with a team generating more than 30 complex pull requests per week. But on every merge, we introduced regressions. The team didn't really understand or know what they were working as a whole. Each of them knew their modules they were working on, but the problem is that they didn't have enough time to absorb all the changes that were happening across the system around them. So the quality ended up being quite poor and getting worse. So this is what is called comprehension debt and what it looks like in practice. I think this pattern is a serious one and important to be aware of, because it's a problem that compounds over time, and it creates this kind of a spiral that looks like this. There is more AI-generated output, then engineers have less comprehension, they understand less what they are building, and that weakens their ability to steer AI well. And that ends up creating more worse output. So that keeps going. And this comprehension, that is the meaning is the erosion of the team understanding of the code base. What is dangerous about this is that it's invisible until you actually lost the understanding, and then it gets very expensive. And this is what might cost you in numbers. I mentioned earlier this split between greenfield and legacy gains. Again, 40% versus 10% or less. So the comprehension debt is the mechanism that moves you from greenfield to legacy, because a legacy code is a code base that nobody fully understands anymore, regardless if that was written a few months back. So this is not code quality problem, it's rather ROI problem, because those gains actually end up being in other places, like the time spent verifying the AI generated code that nobody fully understands. Then you get to see all these regressions that slip through, or you have a slower onboarding processes. So this is where this 35-40 quickly becomes 10 or less. There is one nuance important here to make here, is that you might be okay carrying some comprehension debt, the same way that you can make a conscious decision to carry some technical debt in certain places, projects, or contexts. Is definitely a trade-off. The problem is not having comprehension debt. The problem is not knowing you have it and not deciding intentionally how much you are willing to carry. So the teams that are using AI, one thing that we notice is that actually their confidence is inflated. So they think they understand the code base really well, which definitely makes this even harder to detect and to know how much debt you're actually carrying. So how did we get here? Before AI, writing code, we all know, it was slow, full of friction. A developer had to read the existing code, understand the context, do the back and forth with product, trace dependencies, reason through problems. That process was inefficient, but it was also the way that they built their mental models of the system. So the understanding was a byproduct of the writing process itself. So AI removed a significant part of the friction, which is great, but it also removed the mechanism through which understanding was built. And that time that was freed up from writing code, actually nobody intentionally decided where it was going to. By default, as I mentioned in the case I shared before, it went to more output, more features, moving faster, more PRs. That speed is real, but the understanding didn't come with it. So here's a leadership question. Where is that time going in your organization? And did you make a conscious decision about where you're allocating that time? From my point of view, the answer is that we need to treat understanding as a deliverable on its own. It's not a byproduct of the work anymore. So we need to be explicit about how we are allocating time for this and budget. So here's a simple test that you can run with your own team. Can they explain what changed in the code base last week, why it changed, and what it affects without looking at the code and the PRs? So if the answer is no, then you have some comprehension debt. And I think from my side, I don't think the fix is going to come from more tooling, more AI. It's rather a leadership decision about how to allocate time. So one solution that we are trying to experiment ourselves to fight against this problem is what we call the architectural comprehension reviews. This is a weekly session where the whole team walks through what has changed in the code base that week, why it has changed, and what it affects. What we find interesting about this is that it has a double impact. On the technical side, if it forces developers to understand and to spend time understanding and explain their work out loud, which actually reveals the mental models that the comprehension debt eroded. And on the social side, it helps to strengthen the trust among team members and building this collective ownership of the code base that is needed to basically do any complex project. And this is what the social technical system looks like in practice for us. So we don't have two separate conversations, one about tooling and one about culture. It's one practice that addresses both layers at the same time. So yeah, that is the solution that we are trying to implement ourselves, as I mentioned. So let me bring all this together. Just to recap here, so the real ROI of AI doesn't come from the tools, it comes from the system. There are some organizations, some people who are too fixated on measuring tool usage, adoption, output speed, and how many agents they are running at the same time. I do believe that's the wrong layer to put all their effort into. So leading the transformation well, to me, means something a bit different. So the main takeaways for you to remember are, the first one is to manage expectations. Remember the data that we discussed, the productivity gains, the learning curve. It's important to manage the gap between what executives expect and what teams can really get from AI. That is a conversation worth having, and it's part of our job. The second one is to architect the social technical system. Do not optimize only the tools and the speed. We all know that the technical layer is important, but it's not sufficient. So focus on the social layer. This is where, Danny, I think you're open. Yeah. Focus on the social layer. This is what most teams are leaving on the table. They are not optimizing. It's an important one. And the last one is to treat understanding as a deliverable. So be suspicious of frictionless velocity. So if you're using AI through the SDLC, that frees up time. So we need to reallocate that time and to be conscious, to be intentional about that. This is, I think, it's not a developer call, it's rather a leadership call. So yeah, to make the ROI of AI sustainable and compounding, I think you need to have a team that understands why and what they are building. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. Happy to do any Q&A if we have some questions, Danny. You're on mute now.
Thank you, Mati. That was awesome. We don't have any questions, so I think we can wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sorry about the microphone on, and we'll see each other in the next session. Thank you so much.